She stood on that stage with her hands trembling, her heart pounding so hard she thought the entire room could hear it. And when the billionaire leaned forward in his velvet chair, locked eyes with her, and said those 5 words that would change her life forever, "Sing for me and I will marry you," the whole world went silent. Before we dive into this unbelievable true story of courage, heartbreak, and a love that defied every odd, I need you to do something for me right now. Type your country in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button because you're about to hear a story that will shake you to your core. And share this video with someone who needs to believe in miracles again. Because what you're about to hear is proof that life can turn around in a single moment. Her name was Elena, and 6 months before that night, she was sleeping in her car with her 4-year-old daughter Mia curled up in the back seat, wrapped in the only blanket they owned. Elena wasn't always broken. There was a time when she had dreams that sparkled like stars, when she believed her voice could carry her anywhere, when she sang in her church choir and people would stop mid-conversation just to listen. But life has a way of crushing dreams under the weight of reality. And for Elena, that reality came in the form of a man she thought loved her, a man who put a ring on her finger and a baby in her belly, only to vanish the moment things got hard. She remembered the night he left like it was yesterday. Mia was only 6 months old, crying from an ear infection, and Elena was exhausted, broke, and begging him to just stay, to just help her figure it out. He looked at her with eyes that had already detached, already moved on, and said, "I didn't sign up for this." And then he was gone, taking with him the rent money, her confidence, and any illusion she had about what love was supposed to be. The months that followed were a descent into a kind of hell Elena didn't know existed. She worked 3 jobs, cleaning offices at dawn, waitressing during lunch, and singing at a rundown bar on Friday nights for tips that barely covered diapers. Her voice, once her greatest pride, became a tool of survival, and she hated what it had become. She hated standing in that dim, smoke-filled bar, singing her heart out to drunks who didn't even look up. Hated collecting crumpled bills from tables sticky with spilled beer. Hated the pity in the bartender's eyes when he'd slip her an extra 20 and tell her to take care of that baby. But she did it because Mia needed to eat, because rent was due, because giving up wasn't an option when you had a little girl who looked at you like you were the entire universe. Elena's mother had disowned her when she got pregnant out of wedlock, told her she was a disgrace, told her not to come back until she fixed her life. And those words echoed in Elena's mind every single night when she lay down in that car, staring at the roof, wondering how she was supposed to fix something that felt irreparably shattered. She had no friends left. They'd all drifted away when her life stopped being fun, when she couldn't afford to go out, when every conversation became about her struggles and no one wanted to hear it anymore. She was alone in a way that hollowed her out, but she couldn't afford to feel it, couldn't afford to break down, because Mia was watching, always watching, and Elena needed her daughter to believe that everything was going to be okay, even when she didn't believe it herself. Then one night, everything shifted. Elena was finishing her set at the bar, singing an old jazz standard that used to make her mother cry, and she noticed a man sitting in the corner booth, partially hidden in shadows, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He wasn't like the usual crowd. He wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. His posture was upright and commanding, and there was something in his eyes, something sharp and calculating, like he was assessing her, measuring her worth in ways she couldn't understand. When she finished her song, he stood up, walked straight to her, and handed her a black business card with gold lettering that simply read, "Alexander Kane, CEO, Kane Enterprises," and below it, a phone number. "You have a gift," he said, his voice low and smooth, the kind of voice that was used to being obeyed. "But you're wasting it here." Elena looked at him, tired and skeptical, because she'd heard compliments before, and they never led anywhere good. "Thanks, but I'm not interested in whatever you're selling." He smiled, and it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who always got what he wanted. "I'm not selling anything. I'm offering you an opportunity. There's a charity gala in 2 weeks, hosted by the city's elite, and I need a performer. Someone with real talent, real emotion. I'll pay you $10,000 for one song." Elena's heart stopped. $10,000. That was more money than she'd seen in a year. That was rent for months, food, stability, maybe even a real apartment where Mia could have her own bed. But nothing in life came free, and she'd learned that lesson the hard way. "Why me?" she asked, her voice edged with suspicion. "Because I see potential where others see desperation," Alexander said. And there was something almost cruel in the way he said it, like he enjoyed watching her squirm. "And because I believe in taking risks on people who have everything to lose." She should have said no. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away. But when you're drowning, you don't question the hand that reaches down. You grab it and hope it's real. So she took the card, nodded, and watched him leave, wondering if she just made a deal with the devil. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. Elena practiced every night after Mia fell asleep, singing softly in the car so she wouldn't wake her, perfecting every note, every breath, every emotion. She didn't know what this gala was, didn't know who would be there, but she knew this was her shot, maybe her only shot, to claw her way out of the pit she'd fallen into. Alexander had sent her an address for a boutique, told her to pick out a dress, told her it was taken care of, and when she walked into that store and saw the gowns that cost more than she used to make in 6 months, she almost turned around and left. But the woman behind the counter smiled at her, kind and knowing, and said, "Mr. Kane told us you were coming. Pick anything you like, darling. Tonight you're going to shine." Elena chose a midnight blue gown that hugged her curves and flowed like water, and when she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked like someone who mattered, someone who had worth, and for the first time in a long time, she let herself believe it, even if just for a moment. The night of the gala arrived, and Elena's hands shook as she walked into the grand ballroom of the city's most exclusive hotel. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen starlight. Tables were draped in white silk, and everywhere she looked, there were people who radiated wealth and power. People who had never known what it felt like to choose between feeding your child and paying rent. She felt like an imposter, like at any moment someone would point at her and shout that she didn't belong. But then Alexander appeared at her side, his hand lightly touching the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd. "Don't be nervous," he whispered, and she could feel his breath against her ear. "Just sing like you did that night. Sing like your life depends on it." And it did. God, it did. When it was time, Elena stepped onto the stage, and the room fell silent. Hundreds of eyes turned to her, and for a moment the fear was so overwhelming she thought she might faint. But then she thought of Mia, thought of her daughter's face, thought of every night she'd sung in that dingy bar, every humiliation she'd endured, every moment she'd felt invisible, and she opened her mouth and let it all pour out. She sang an old ballad about loss and hope, about fighting when you have nothing left, and she didn't just sing the words, she lived them, breathed them, bled them into the air, and the room was transfixed. Grown men's eyes glistened, women dabbed at tears with silk handkerchiefs, and when she hit the final note, holding it until her lungs burned, the silence that followed was deafening. Then the applause came, thunderous and overwhelming, and Elena felt something crack open inside her, something she'd kept locked away for so long, she'd forgotten it existed. Hope. Alexander was waiting for her when she came off stage, and the look in his eyes had changed. It wasn't calculating anymore. It was something else, something hungry and dangerous, and impossibly intense. "You were magnificent," he said, and before she could respond, he leaned in close and whispered, "I want to make you an offer, Elena, a real one." She should have been happy, should have been relieved, but there was something in his tone that sent a chill down her spine. "What kind of offer?" she asked. He smiled, and it was the smile of a man about to change the game entirely. "Sing for me, and I will marry you." Elena's breath caught. She stared at him, searching his face for any sign that he was joking. But he was dead serious. His eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. "You're insane," she whispered. "Maybe," he said, "but I'm also a man who knows what he wants. And I want you. Not just your voice. I want all of you. I want to give you the life you deserve. Want to give your daughter everything she's ever dreamed of. All you have to do is say yes." "Why?" Elena demanded, her voice rising. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me. I know enough, Alexander said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I know you're strong, I know you're broken, and I know you're exactly what I need. Marry me, Elena. Let me save you. And there it was, the most dangerous thing anyone had ever offered her. Not love, not romance, but salvation. And she hated how desperately she wanted to say yes, hated how every fiber of her being screamed to grab this lifeline and never let go. But she also knew that nothing came without a price, and she needed to know what his was. What do you get out of this? She asked, her voice barely audible. Alexander's smile widened, and for the first time she saw something vulnerable flicker across his face, something real beneath the polished exterior. Peace, he said quietly. I get peace. Elena didn't understand, couldn't understand, but she also didn't have the luxury of time or options. And when he extended his hand, she took it, sealing a deal that would unravel both of their lives in ways neither of them could have predicted. The next morning, Elena woke up in a penthouse suite that overlooked the entire city, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and for a moment, she thought she was dreaming. But then she heard Mia's laughter from the next room, heard her daughter's delighted squeals, and she realized it was real. All of it was real. Alexander had arranged for Mia to be brought to the hotel, had filled the suite with toys and clothes and everything a little girl could want. And when Elena walked into the living room and saw her daughter's face lit up with pure joy, she felt something in her chest tighten painfully. This was what she'd been fighting for, what she'd sacrificed everything for, and now it was here, handed to her on a silver platter by a man she barely knew. But Alexander wasn't there. Instead, there was a note on the marble countertop, written in elegant script. Take the day, rest, tomorrow we begin. Elena didn't know what begin meant, but she soon found out. Alexander wasn't just a billionaire. He was a king in his world, a man who commanded empires and crushed competitors without hesitation. And he wanted Elena by his side, not as a trophy, but as something else, something she couldn't quite name. He introduced her to his world slowly, methodically, taking her to dinners with investors, charity events, high society gatherings, and everywhere they went, people stared. Not because she didn't belong, though she felt like she didn't, but because Alexander Kane, the man who never brought anyone to these events, the man who was famously private and untouchable, had chosen her. But there were whispers, too, cruel, cutting whispers that followed her like shadows. Who is she? She's nobody. Gold digger. He'll get bored. Elena heard them all, felt every judgmental gaze like a blade against her skin. But she held her head high because she'd survived worse. And she wasn't about to let these people, with their perfect lives and empty souls, break her. What she didn't expect was how much Alexander shielded her. He never acknowledged the whispers, never let anyone disrespect her in his presence, and the few times someone dared to make a snide comment, the look he gave them was so cold, so lethal, that they visibly paled and apologized immediately. He was protecting her, and she didn't know why, didn't know what she meant to him beyond this strange arrangement they'd made, but she felt it, felt the weight of his attention, the intensity of his focus, and it terrified her because she'd promised herself she'd never depend on a man again. And yet here she was, completely at his mercy. Weeks passed, and the wedding was arranged, a small, private ceremony with no fanfare, no guests, just Elena, Alexander, Mia, and a judge. It felt surreal, like she was watching someone else's life unfold. And when the judge pronounced them husband and wife, and Alexander leaned in to kiss her, it was soft, almost hesitant, like he was afraid she might shatter. Elena didn't know what to feel. Relief, fear, gratitude, suspicion. It all tangled together into a knot she couldn't untie. That night, in the sprawling mansion Alexander called home, he showed her to a bedroom that was hers alone, beautifully decorated, with a view of the gardens. And when she looked at him questioningly, he said, I told you I'd marry you. I didn't say I'd force you into anything you're not ready for. This is your space, Elena. Take all the time you need. And that's when she realized He wasn't what she thought. He wasn't using her, wasn't playing some sick game. He was damaged, just like her, and he needed her in ways he couldn't articulate, and she needed him too, even if she was too scared to admit it. But just as Elena began to let her guard down, just as she started to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could work, the past came roaring back with a vengeance. It started with a phone call, a blocked number that Elena almost didn't answer. But something made her pick up, and when she heard the voice on the other end, her blood turned to ice. Elena? Baby, it's me. It's Marcus. Marcus, Mia's father, the man who abandoned them, who destroyed her, who left her with nothing but heartbreak and a baby to raise alone. And now he was back, his voice slick and familiar, like no time had passed, like he hadn't shattered her entire world. What do you want? Elena asked, her voice shaking with rage. I heard you got married, Marcus said, and she could hear the smirk in his voice. Married some rich guy. Good for you, babe. But here's the thing. I'm Mia's father, and I have rights. I want to see my daughter. You have no rights, Elena hissed. You gave those up when you walked out. That's not how the law sees it, sweetheart, Marcus said, his tone turning dark. I've been talking to a lawyer, and unless you want this to get ugly, unless you want me to drag you through court and make your new husband's life a living hell, you're going to let me see my daughter. And maybe, just maybe, you're going to make it worth my while to stay quiet. Elena's hands trembled so violently she almost dropped the phone. He was blackmailing her, threatening to destroy the fragile new life she'd built, and she didn't know what to do, didn't know how to fight him without risking everything. She didn't tell Alexander, not at first. She thought she could handle it, thought she could pay Marcus off with some of the money Alexander had given her, thought she could make him disappear again. But Marcus wasn't interested in a one-time payout. He wanted more, always more, and every time she gave him money, he came back demanding double, threatening to go public, threatening to tell the world that Alexander Kane's new wife was a fraud, a nobody who trapped a billionaire, and Elena felt the walls closing in. It all came crashing down one night when Alexander came home early and found Elena sitting in the dark, crying so hard she couldn't breathe, her phone clutched in her hand, a message from Marcus glowing on the screen. Last chance, $500,000 or I go to the press tomorrow. Alexander didn't say a word. He took the phone from her hand, read the message, and his face went completely blank, a terrifying kind of calm that made Elena's heart stop. Who is this? He asked, his voice deadly quiet. It's Mia's father, Elena whispered, and the shame in her voice nearly broke her. He's blackmailing me. He wants money, or he's going to destroy us. Alexander looked at her for a long moment, and then he did something she didn't expect. He pulled her into his arms, held her so tightly she could barely breathe, and said, No one threatens my family. And that's when Elena realized she wasn't just a contract to him, wasn't just a convenience or a project. She was his family, and he would burn the world down to protect her. What Alexander did next was swift, brutal, and utterly ruthless. Within 48 hours, Marcus was facing criminal charges for extortion, his assets were frozen, and every dirty secret he'd ever tried to hide was exposed to the world. Alexander didn't just neutralize the threat, he obliterated it, made sure Marcus would never dare to come near Elena or Mia again, and when it was over, when Marcus was behind bars awaiting trial, Alexander came home, found Elena, and said, You should have told me sooner. I didn't want to be a burden, Elena said, tears streaming down her face. You're not a burden, Alexander said fiercely. You're my wife, and I protect what's mine. That night something shifted between them. The walls they'd both been hiding behind crumbled, and for the first time they talked. Really talked. Alexander told her about his own past, about a childhood filled with neglect and cruelty, about parents who saw him as an asset, not a son, about building his empire from nothing because he refused to be powerless ever again. He told her about the loneliness that came with success, the emptiness of a life filled with everything except the one thing that mattered, connection. And Elena told him about her own pain, her own failures, her own fears, and they sat together in the dark, two broken people who'd found each other by accident and realized they didn't have to be broken alone. From that moment on, everything changed. Alexander stopped treating their marriage like a business arrangement and started treating it like a partnership. He came home early to have dinner with Elena and Mia, read bedtime stories, played tea party, and laughed. God, he laughed in a way Elena had never heard before. A sound so pure and unguarded, it made her heart ache. And Elena stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, stopped expecting him to leave, and started believing that maybe, just maybe, she deserved this happiness. But life, as always, had other plans. 6 months into their marriage, Alexander's company faced a hostile takeover attempt from a rival corporation, and the stress nearly destroyed him. He worked around the clock, barely slept, barely ate, and Elena watched helplessly as the man she'd come to love disappeared into himself, consumed by the need to win, to prove he was still untouchable. She tried to reach him, tried to pull him back, but he shut her out, told her he had to handle it alone. And Elena felt the old familiar fear creeping back, the fear that she wasn't enough, that she'd never be enough. Then one night, Alexander didn't come home. Elena waited, called his phone over and over, and finally, at 3 in the morning, she got a call from the hospital. Alexander had collapsed in his office, exhaustion and stress pushing his body past its limits. And when Elena arrived and saw him lying in that hospital bed, pale and fragile, and so utterly vulnerable, something inside her shattered and reformed all at once. She sat beside him, held his hand, and whispered, "You don't have to do this alone. You don't have to be strong all the time. Let me help you. Let me carry some of this." When Alexander woke up, the first thing he saw was Elena's face, and he broke. He cried in her arms, the kind of soul-deep sobs that come from years of holding everything in. And Elena held him, whispered that it was okay, that she was there, that she wasn't going anywhere. From that day forward, they were a team. Elena didn't just stand by Alexander's side. She became his partner in every sense of the word. She learned the business, asked questions, challenged him when he was being stubborn, and brought a perspective he'd never had. Together, they fought off the takeover, not through aggression, but through innovation, through showing the world that Kane Enterprises wasn't just a company, it was a vision, and they weren't going to let anyone take that away. And through it all, Mia thrived. She had a father now, a real one, who loved her fiercely, who showed up to every recital and parent-teacher meeting, who tucked her in every night and told her she could be anything she wanted to be. Elena watched her daughter transform from a scared little girl who'd only known struggle into a confident, joyful child who believed the world was full of possibilities. And it was the greatest gift she could have ever received. Years passed, and Elena's story became legend, not because she married a billionaire, but because she proved that strength doesn't come from never falling. It comes from getting back up, from refusing to let your circumstances define you, from believing you're worthy of love even when the world tells you you're not. She started a foundation to help single mothers, gave them resources, job training, and most importantly, hope. She sang again, not for money but for the sheer joy of it, and her voice, once a tool of survival, became a beacon of inspiration. And Alexander? He learned that true power isn't measured in wealth or influence. It's measured in the people you love, the lives you touch, and the legacy you leave behind. Together, they built a life that was messy and beautiful and real. A life that proved that sometimes, the most unexpected connections are the ones that save us. On their 10th anniversary, Alexander took Elena back to that bar where they first met, the place where he'd first heard her sing, and he asked her to sing for him again. She did, the same song she'd sung that night, and when she finished, he pulled her close and said, "I asked you to sing for me, and I'd marry you. You did, and I did. But what I didn't tell you was that I was already yours the moment I heard your voice. I just needed an excuse to make you mine." Elena laughed, tears streaming down her face, and said, "Then I guess we both got what we needed." And they did. They really did. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that it's never too late for a second chance, I need you to do something right now. Drop your country in the comments. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss another story like this. And share this with someone who needs to hear it. because we all need to be reminded that miracles happen when we're brave enough to keep singing.